All right. Done a bunch of serious informational videos. I figured I would break up the monotony a bit by something maybe a little bit goofier, but hopefully still informative. This will be a dramatic reading of the profile EIE by Stratiyevskaya. If you've never read those profiles, uh, they're a lot of fun. They're not always accurate in every detail, but they're very evocative, almost literary. And for me, being exposed to them was sort of the moment that's like, I'm not in this positive thinking corporate zone anymore. I am somewhere else. So they can sort of give you a good idea of like types, neurosis, their darkness, what they seem to want. I figured for the first dramatic reading, I'd pick dramatic type EIE. So let's see how this goes. EIE by Stratiyevskaya. Ego block. First function. FE. Extroverted ethics. For the EIE, the world of human experiences and feelings is not only a topic of interest and observation, but also his primary workshop and laboratory. Here he both creates and studies. To study the human soul, to see the source of a person's pain and sufferings, to show the depth of his experiences and emotions, to understand the emotional motives behind a person's behavior with all their apparent contradictions. In this, the EIE sees his predestination. He was born for this, and with this, he will be engaged his entire life, regardless of his actual worldly occupation. Not one from EIE's circle of acquaintances will be left without his emotional effect. To whom will he turn with a minor joke? To whom with a sharp quip or a ruse? To whom with sophisticated irony? The EIE reflects the soul of any person as if in a mirror. He can lead any person into his theater, into his emotional game, into his workshop laboratory. The EIE often refers to the object of his jokes with an affectionate irony and an air of lenient superiority, as if he is now positioned above him in some other world, where the entire absurdity and awkwardness of the behavior of his subject of his attention is particularly evident to him. EIE's jokes usually have mystifying and mystic black humor undernotes. Daniel, here's what I have done for you. Are you scared? I've left you some food. If you don't eat it up, I will then. Scared? I will eat it myself, and only try to not drink the milk. I will feed it to the dogs. Scared now? No, not you. The milk, of course. Creating an oppressive, tense situation comes naturally to the EIE. He can accomplish this in almost any state. Good mood, poor mood, from boredom, from having little to do. A minor occasion will suffice. And suddenly, metallic notes, strict intonations, and hammered articulation appear in EIE's voice, and a heavily fixated gaze and timed pauses, during which the EIE deliberates on the continuation of his monologue. Around each person, the EIE creates a certain emotional field, which he charges, either positively or negatively, at his own discretion, by constantly expressing his attitudes regarding this person's ethical and personal qualities. Moreover, the EIE formulates these statements not as his personal point of view, but as general and already prevailing opinions, which he personally would only be happy to doubt. Since all of this is presented in the form of subtle hints accompanied by the most expressive mimicry, EIE's conversation partners immediately feel themselves intrigued, and imperceptibly to themselves, they fall under EIE's social and emotional guidance and influence, becoming obedient marionettes moved by the strings of such, as it seems to them, well-wishing and personable conversation partner. It is very difficult to recollect yourself in time and to come out of EIE's charming social influence. Here, the EIE immediately acts so offended, disappointed, and filled with regret that his conversation partner begins to feel awkward for his tactless behavior. Seemingly, there remain no other option other than to voluntarily subject oneself again to EIE's emotional and social influence. Putting on either intentionally indifferent or mysterious or saddened look, the EIE attempts to draw attention and intrigue everyone who can possibly witness him in this state. Subconsciously, the EIE uses any opportunity to find suitable objects for his emotional influence, most ideal of which is, of course, his dual maxim, the LSI, who needs exactly this nature and style of interaction. The EIE is most of all annoyed by absence of interest in this play acting, and by someone's deliberate unwillingness to become an actor, or at least part of the audience. Staunch and impenetrable indifference and lack of involvement in EIE's ethical and social games, this is truly one thing before which the EIE is completely helpless, and it is the very thing he fears the most. The EIE is especially wary and worried by people who keep a mind of their own, although it's difficult to be more on one's own mind than the EIE him or herself. Any representative of this type, independent of age or an occupation, is usually able to coordinate and manage his mimicry, tone of voice, and intonation magnificently well. Due to this ability, the EIE is able to favorably predispose his or her conversation partners, and then do with them whatever he or she wishes, meanwhile obtaining from them the maximum of information. If the EIE so desires, he can make a person calm down and lower his guard, inspire him to sincerity, and persuade him of anything he wishes. Sometimes the opposite happens, and the EIE will literally shackle a person by fear and anxiety, trying to completely subordinate them to his will and necessitating them to trust him completely. Hamlet is a director of human emotions, a director of states and moods. To any person, the Hamlet will assign precisely that state or mood which he considers necessary to assign. Such emotional management is usually done from Hamlet's own considerations, interests, suspicions, and assumptions. Regardless of the scale on which a representative of this type unravels his activity, whether he is a politician or a low-level employee, the EIE with perfection wields his entire arsenal of methods and tools needed to forge a necessary to him public opinion, with the aid of which he then intends to direct the actions of people around him into a specific predetermined course. The creation of formal or informal groups within an already existing system, the emergence of a new formal or informal leader and the displacement of the existing leadership, the changes within hierarchical layers of the system, the exclusion from the group of those who have interfered with his rearrangement of forces. All of this is a sphere of EIE's never-ceasing activity, independent of his age, occupation, location, and his current social position. Arrangement of forces within a hierarchical system. This is the main area of EIE's personal and objective interests and the most important sphere of his activities. It is extremely important for the EIE to not only find the existing informal leader, but to also reveal a potential leader. The EIE then forges his relations and current group relative to this future, potential rearrangement of forces and potential change of leadership. For this reason, representatives of this type strive to be in the know of what each person has on his or her mind. The EIE is especially interested in and wary of people who are internally independent, who place themselves outside of career, outside of gossip, outside the interests of the collective, outside of public opinion. Such people are difficult to understand to him. The EIE cannot imagine a life without a struggle. To put this more precisely, the EIE cannot imagine life outside of a state of a struggle. He always has something to fight for, to strive towards, and always someone to do this with. If there is no goal, he will come up with one. If there is no enemy, he will find one. In any case, he won't sit around without a purpose. It is typical for representatives of this type to create obstacles for no reason, solely in order to overcome them. Then life immediately becomes more interesting and eventful for them. Moreover, these obstacles are often of social and ethical nature. Some intrigue is started based on fictional gossip or on an EIE's personal suspicions and assumptions. Then some kind of process of fermentation starts within the group, some kind of splitting into subgroups, into camps of enemies and friends, of like-minded people, of dissidents, those who are with us and those who are against us. Additionally, the EIE won't allow anyone to remain outside of this process of fragmentation. People who refrain from choosing sides or who were absent and didn't play a part in this process, the EIE doesn't tolerate for one simple reason. The EIE is intolerant of indifference to his problems, his interests, his activities. He does not suffer apathy and inattention, in part because he himself does not understand such a state of mind in principle, and thus he does not accept it from others. This is too unnatural for him. Hamlet is always a rebel and a restless soul. This is not only Maxim Gorky's character of Danko, who lit up the way for the people with his glowing heart, but also the petrel bird who heralds a storm on the sea, and the lone sail who is searching for this storm. Many members of this type, without being aware of this themselves, behave and hold themselves in a very provoking and cocky manner, which is especially evident in their childhood and adolescent years. For example, the EIE sometimes looks for a quarrel simply because everything is too calm and quiet, and this for him is alarming and frightening and irritating. By and large, the EIE does not believe in peace and quiet. If the pool of water has gone too quiet, then there are bound to be water gremlins in it, and they have to be identified. It is exactly in such orientation and attitude that the EIE sees the highest manifestation of civic duty and loyalty to the existing regime. It should be noted that EIE's type of mind has been programmed for viability and effectiveness in extreme situations, for periods of totalitarian systems, in the era of violent upheavals in history. To survive in such troubled times and to get through them, this is the most important social and biological challenge for this type of personality. This is why the EIE is characterized by such traits as ethical maneuverability, foresight, prudence, loyalty, and political farsightedness, as well as the desire to get into the higher levels of the hierarchy in order to obtain certain advantages in critical situations. The EIE is always politically active, always attentive toward his rights and stances as a citizen. He is irritated by an attitude of indifference toward matters of social and public importance. He is annoyed by the type of person who simply lives and exists, who wants to simply keep his peace of soul and mind. The EIE hates philistinism and commonality. He can for some time play a game of family comfort and idyllic atmosphere, but to get caught up in mundane life, this he won't allow for himself. Moreover, he will consider this to be a kind of personal degradation. Some female representatives of this type are very annoyed by society's requirements for women to lock themselves into their family circle. Such requirements adversely influence their character and lead them to turn family relationships into arenas of military political struggles. The EIE is able to give any, even the most insignificant domestic episode, an ideological and political coloration, and on this basis proceed to develop an active social life for himself. It may be someone's anniversary date or someone else has fallen ill. The EIE is already organizing a public collection of money and extending the necessary services. He is busy and bustling more than anyone else, and most importantly, he is advertising his own initiative. That is, the fact that it is exactly him who heads this initiative. Here we have all discussed, decided, appointed, organized, endorsed, supported, and so on and so forth. At any age, in any environment, in any situation, the EIE puts a claim to leadership. The EIE can find a suitable audience always when he needs it. Give him just a pretext, and already he feels as if at the podium. He is no longer simply talking, but delivering a speech. Moreover, he can hold a public rally without any reason. For this, he only needs to be in the right mood, if the soul burns or anger takes a hold. Then the audience will be found and the topic will be selected. Unlike Don Quixote, ILE, who can rally any time, whenever and wherever he pleases, and not always in the language of the people around him, the EIE very carefully chooses his listeners. He always knows whom and how he can agitate. Reproving, condemning, putting labels, pointing fingers, all of these are not only EIE's self-expression, but also methods of creating a community spirit and shaping the public opinion, and on larger scales, a way of doing politics and making history. Become the initiator of some undertaking or project, bringing new people to become involved in it, organizing them, leading them. With all of this, the EIE eagerly engages himself. And he doesn't have to be a politician for this. He simply needs to get into the flow of things, to guess the right direction and take the necessary initiative. It should be noted that in his social initiatives, the EIE is very far-sighted and prudent. If he has started something, it wasn't by accident. There's always a long-term goal to it, a calculated goal, not just for the goodness of his heart. What the EIE does from the goodness of his heart, he does not demonstrate and advertise to the public. You never know how others would react to it. What if by these good deeds, he will get into trouble? For example, a representative of this type, for many years in secret from his wife, financially helped all his relatives. A little bit to everyone, to some from his salary, to others from his awards. But he warned everyone, don't tell my wife, she should know nothing about this. There wasn't a single instance that he forgot to make this mention. EIE's leadership is also supported by the fact that he or she is always a born talented actor, and this is EIE's most valuable quality. He is an actor in life, and in the theater, and in history and politics. When the EIE comes on stage, the audience cries and laughs with him. And when the EIE comes to politics, the laughing people remain less and less. Many members of this type become distinguished actors, directors, poets, and musicians of the time. As long as the EIE has an audience, his inspiration is inexhaustible. Second function, NI, introverted intuition. If we consider people's emotions as material in the creative laboratory of the EIE, then time in his understanding is that tool or that furnace by which this material gets tempered and processed. For the EIE, it is not enough to create a person's emotional model. It's also needed for it to mature over time. It is necessary to show the nature of a person, that is, the model of his behavior, in the process of its development. The EIE needs to show how it was in the past and how it will be in the future. The quantity of emotions experienced per a unit of time. This is the formula that expresses EIE's way of existence, his technological regime. The EIE imparts an impression that he is able to sense physically the duration of any stretch of time. For him, a unit of time is like a living cell that lives with the life of the emotions that fill it. EIE musician has his own sense of rhythms and tempo. For him, there exist micro-rhythms and micro-tempos, and in this lies the secret of his musical expressiveness. The concept of duration of a note for him means the duration of a life of a note. So much each of his notes is saturated by the finest nuances, living with a bright emotional life within a specific destined to it instant. EIE performer is always recognizable by his skill to maintain note and pause, by his ability to create his performance on the interplay of tempos and nuances of emotions. Just as EIE dancer is distinguished by precise coordination of movements, which correspond to the finest musical plasticity, as well as by exceptional expressiveness of gestures. His movements and gestures unravel over time as a bud of a flower. His expressiveness builds up, so that spectator is able to witness him and understand him and empathize with him. EIE politician knows magnificently well how to manipulate time. He sees the advantages of the development of a situation in time. He knows how to heal a problem over time, and he knows how to grow a problem over time, i.e., he knows how to use time as a unique garden where the problem ripens to the moment when it can be presented to society in the most convincing form. Hamlet knows how to materialize time, how to make it tangible. He knows how to make others feel the significance of the moment, even if this moment lasts for decades. The EIE can use his advantages in time, which were granted to him by this or that situation. For example, during wartime, an EIE politician can request an armistice in order to get a temporary respite and use it for the benefit of his own side, to relocate troops, to build up new forces, etc. After resting and collecting forces, he can set up a new tumult or provocation and thus obtain a reason to renew military actions. The EIE knows very well how to coordinate his activities in time. Whatever he does, it always seems to be very proper in time, i.e., timed well. Any EIE is always a splendid strategist. Therefore, each of his activities and actions is predetermined by purposes and tasks of his final plans, which in turn can be sufficiently flexible. For example, for EIE politician, the state of war is sometimes more necessary than the final victory in it. Moreover, EIE frequently feels disappointed precisely when the final goal of his actions has already been achieved. Having already grown accustomed to hyperactive, oversaturated with events life, the EIE finds it difficult to switch to another less active mode of operation. In this situation, he feels that something has gone missing from his life, something is lacking, the sensation of the missed or not completely realized possibilities. For the EIE, it is very important to be confident in the opportuneness of his own actions. And for this very reason, he or she must always be properly informed about everything. The EIE is afraid of not having enough information in that which concerns him and that which is important to him, as this might lead him to act inopportunely, or worse, to lag behind, which the EIE tries to avoid at any cost. During critical situations, the EIE usually precisely coordinates his activities and actions in time. He usually tries to deal the first blow. Moreover, this blow must be completely unexpected and stunning with its attacking force, for too much has been put on the stakes. For this reason, the EIE needs that people around him share their information and their plans with him. And for this reason, the EIE is wary of people who seem calm and secretive, who remain uninvolved in what worries him. Perhaps they already know how to get ahead. Perhaps they have already obtained what he is trying to attain. And this is why they are so calm and sure of themselves. The EIE is always interested in the experience of others' mistakes and errors. He thoroughly studies them and tries to draw useful conclusions to avoid making the same mistakes himself in the future. But whatever his own negative experiences might be, in the critical situation, the EIE acts as his own feelings and intuition guide him to act, even if it goes against reason and common sense. Possibly this is why fanaticism and fanatic self-renunciation are characteristic of the representatives of this type. Many terrorists kamikaze can be found among people of this type, similarly to a match that is burned out but squelch the flame. The EIE in any historical era can see the highest destiny in giving up his life for an idea, even if this idea has been born in a small circle of his friends and is shared only by a few people. For this very reason, a fanatically predisposed representative of this type won't see any large misgiving in taking hostage innocent people, even from his own camp. There is no greater honor than to die for an idea, so let there be at least some use from the common life of these folks. The EIE simply cannot be a passive observer of important historical events. Even working as journalist, international reviewer, or speaker in news programs and political telecasts, a representative of this type delivers material very tendentiously and purposefully, as if attempting to create around the illuminated by him question a specific public opinion, with the aid of which he as if expects to coordinate the actions of the chief politicians and to direct them to a specific course of action. The EIE is characterized by a sense of historical predestination. He may feel himself a part of a historical process, a part of the epic, the bringer and the spokesman of its ideas. His tendency for political and civic activity is another reason why he may feel disconcerted and upset by someone else's principled indifference to politics and unprincipled loyalties to some interests. The EIE can often be seen working on the ideological front with sincere enthusiasm and results, which nevertheless does not prevent him from expressing sincere disappointment concerning historical mistakes made by his leadership, for he, better than anyone else, sees the unfavorable trends, tendencies, and outcomes in the social and political spheres of common life. EIE's life may have periods of bright, emotionally saturated life, filled with the interesting, large-scale projects and activities. And there can be the periods of prolonged waiting for his star hour. Moreover, this later period is no less important for the EIE than the first one, and even with its apparent idleness in reality, it is no less saturated with activity. This can be the period of EIE's invisible activity, the period of his preparation for the decisive moment. It is completely unimportant which deed the EIE will commit in his star hour. This can be a coup d'etat, a brilliant speech in the parliament, a magnificently orchestrated play, a terrorist act, which signifies the beginning of a new historical epoch. The main thing is that in his star hour, the EIE will enter into history. The EIE sees time on a large scale and plays with time also on a large scale. The small immediate punctuality is not always important to him. He may live by the schedule he has outlined for the day, or he may not. This is not important to the EIE. The EIE is much more interested in upcoming global scale changes, as well as his historical accuracy and the opportuneness of his own actions. It is important to him to organically enter and blend with the epoch, in order not to be the log which lies across history. The EIE understands the nature of one or another epoch and is able to feel its slogan. He is able to see analogies and patterns in the alternations of historical periods of time. He also frequently feels nostalgia for that epoch which resonated with him by its ideology, in which ideas close to him in spirit were popular and widespread. And if the EIE doesn't find a place for himself in today's society, he lives in its past. Superego block. Third function, TE, extroverted logic. For EIE, it is difficult to lead and manage a group of people. To put this more accurately, it's difficult for the group to be led by an EIE. The very process of having to establish business connections and relationships is always not easy for him, because the EIE foresees various possible differences, disagreements, and conflicts of interest ahead of time, before any business conversations, and adopts an according attitude. The EIE finds it boring and difficult to check on the work of subordinates and coworkers, to keep business documentation in order, and to carry out the necessary but routine everyday work. The organization of the work process, the creation of the necessary technical conditions, coming up with salary payments, material encouragement, and stimulation for work. All this is given to EIE at the cost of much effort, while the results are typically less than modest. Therefore, in a situation of the absence of economic incentives and ineffective and low productivity labor, there remains only one method for the EIE to maintain the necessary working regime: emotional and administrative pressuring. And these means and methods the EIE masters fully. The EIE cannot simply say, "I am happy or not happy with your work." For him, this is too improvident to express his personal opinion. The EIE in general doesn't like it when someone refers to his personal opinions. Therefore, he fears speaking from his personal point of view. More likely, the EIE will say, "The director has praised your report," or "Everyone has noticed that you have been working less lately." Thus, the EIE will express not his personal views, but will phrase it as a public opinion, which in reality can be totally different or is not yet formed at all regarding this particular matter. But it is advantageous for the EIE to present the prevailing opinion in precisely this matter, in order to direct the actions of some person in a deliberate and goal-oriented manner. Towards this purpose, the EIE needs to show the relation of surrounding people to what is happening, to give an evaluation not from himself personally, but to namely express it as the general opinion. The EIE is as if saying, "I'm not the only one who thinks this way, everything thinks this, and everyone won't lie," while in reality he may not have asked the opinion of anyone. The EIE is completely unabashed that he is bluffing, falsifying, and altering with facts, especially if this is done in the interest of the matter and in connection with the special importance of the current situation. The facts and reality of the situation cannot be verified by other people on the spot and are generally not important. What is important is his personal desire to exert some effect on his coworker or subordinate, to make him work under any, even quite severe, most low paid conditions, or to set him back at work and make him leave so that he is no longer a hindrance. Other, more comfortable and conductive to work conditions, the EIE simply cannot create. Moreover, the more severe the working conditions, the more important it is for the EIE to show himself in a good light in a leading or managing role, and keep this job for longer. Even being a regular employee, the EIE can present himself as a super conscientious worker who works for the idea, for the thanks, and be the model of working enthusiasm. Of course, the spirit of superiority and tendency toward the leadership won't allow the EIE to remain in a low position for long. The EIE also won't miss a chance to reposition the forces to a more beneficial and advantageous for himself setup, which will help him to move into a more convenient layer of the hierarchy at work. The essence of EIE's business intrigues lies exactly in finding the necessary levers of effect on people around him and a solid point of support for him or herself. Being concerned by his position and authority as a leader, the EIE freely and easily manipulates by the behavior of his subordinates, attentively looking out that he is not schemed, tricked, and set up himself. EIEs as managers, leaders, and government officials know how to find the guilty people where there are none, how to take by fright any person who is dependent on them. For the EIE leader, it is very characteristic to create an artificially tense situation, to impose a guilt complex on others, and to expect for himself the very worst. The EIE leader is frequently inclined to play the role of a kind of Caraboss Barabbas who controls his marionettes. From time to time, he pulls on their strings and then watches how the whole mechanism of his intrigue comes into effect. This is his special method of coordinating the work of his subordinates, as well as controlling the situation. As a result of such management, discussions about business and production get constantly rerouted to the personal and ethical sphere, from the area of business relations to the topics of sorting out personal relationships, where the EIE feels himself like a fish in water and where he doesn't yield his priority to anyone else. The EIE also fears the consequences of the responsibility that he has undertaken for himself. This is another reason why he feels more comfortable creating a public opinion and speaking on its behalf than openly stating his personal point of view, and to act in accordance with the opinion of the majority instead of making decisions himself and carrying the resultant responsibility on his shoulders. This tactic also provides the EIE with legal cover, since he is acting and expressing himself as a minority that has subordinated its opinion to the will of the majority, from the mass of which it will always be possible to find some culprits and write off any mistakes and attribute any excesses to them. If the post occupied by EIE allows only for personal responsibility for the adopted solution, then, after committing an irreparable error, this leader can further act according to the principle, "After us, it doesn't matter if even a deluge happens." The EIE is always wary of any counter-business initiative, especially ones that were not personally sanctioned by him. For this reason, he develops the best business relations with his dual, the LSI, who can sensitively guess the plans and intentions of his leadership, who always follows the subordination and acts only in accordance with the assigned instructions. With representatives of other sociotypes, the EIE finds it difficult to work. They may act in some unpredictable and not understandable to him ways, bring about some unforeseen troubles. The EIE, just as his dual Maxim, keeps track that the material incentives would be distributed by the quantity of the invested labor, with respect part of personal participation. And with respect, she has 5, but we will pay you equally. I already took care of it. Only tell no one of this, otherwise you will let me down. Starting his own personal business is also rather difficult for the EIE, since in this case, he ends up outside of the hierarchical system and feels himself unprotected. There is no arrangement of forces that he is used to. No one makes decisions for him. For all his actions, he now answers himself, and for all his mistakes, he pays from his own pocket. In business relations, the intriguing tone of EIE only hinders him, since it makes people around him grow suspicious and sense them against him. A starting EIE entrepreneur and small business owner has allowed herself to spin intrigue for some time with her clients, as a result of which they managed to do without her services. They've made transaction with each other directly and left her without the commission. Analyzing his errors, the EIE starts to teach himself business ethics. He learns how to subordinate his emotions to reason. He learns to not do what he wants, but that which is expedient for business. He learns to be more restrained in the expression of his emotions. He watches his own emotional lexicon and curbs his expressions. He tries not to express either his own or public opinions. He learns to be appropriate around those that pay him, around those who order which songs will be played. Finding themselves in a capitalist system, EIEs with socialist origins have an extremely difficult time and have to go through a tough school. Moreover, they are far from always being successful at this. To study the needs of the market, market prices, and market relations for the EIE with his rebellious and agitated soul is far from being the most interesting work. Therefore, the EIE often finds it difficult to protect his business interests, to stand up for himself and his business, to accurately evaluate his own work and results, to accurately estimate what salary he can ask for and then insist on this payment. At one job, he may ask for some unrealistic payment. At another job, he may agree to work almost for free. In the EIE's opinion, here everything depends on the solvency and ability to pay of the employer, of which the EIE is not always informed. He can agree to work for free as an advertisement for himself, to receive a recommendation letter and obtain work experience, but he always feels uncertain of whether his personal commitment and enthusiasm might be being abused. The EIE can work from altruistic motivations, but he finds it to be highly unpleasant if he is being kept for a simpleton and offered a symbolic payment only because he is known for his voluntary, ideological, charitable streak. As an independent agent, the EIE always tries to carry out his work at the highest professional level. He, in general, respects professionalism, and greatly worries if due to some objective reasons he does not succeed in this. He tries to think everything through in advance, and to work through all the minor parts and details ahead of time. Sometimes he notices a sweet raisin in them for which the whole undertaking was planned. In his everyday home life, the EIE tries to be economical and prudent, but this happens with difficulty for him. The EIE frequently purchases some unnecessary things for him or herself, spends personal money beyond measure, makes various unnecessary expenditures if he happens to be in the mood. The EIE would like to live a grand and lavish life, to show his generosity, to treat himself to nice things. When the EIE takes care of his own budget, he may find it difficult to make the ends meet and not go into debt. Here he is saved by his dual, the LSI, for whom every penny is counted and every expenditure is accounted for. The LSI likes to keep his own, and that of others, finances in order, and gladly takes on the role of the family accountant. Over time, the EIE learns from the LSI on how to be practical and economic in his everyday life. The EIE loves to work by tried and proven methods. In this, his dual, LSI, Maxim, is also of valuable service to him. The LSI is an unsurpassed master of development of various methods, instructions, and procedures, who is capable of carefully studying every detail of the work process, sorting it out on the shelves, and then passing this information to the EIE by means of providing clear, comprehensive explanations that don't omit anything in questions that are of concern and value to the EIE. The EIE dislikes starting several jobs or projects at the same time. He doesn't like overloads. He's inclined to explain any errors in his own calculations and plans by excessive workloads or some kind of distractions that spread his attention onto different matters, causing him to omit something. Losing attention is actually a serious problem for the EIE. He or she gets easily distracted from one task or project to another, and sometimes even completely forgets what he or she was previously doing. As a result, many projects, tasks, and matter may accumulate in this kind of convoluted ball of problems, which the EIE then has to unwind and do over again. Thus, the EIE prefers to take care of the most important tasks and matters in an environment that would preclude any distractions and outside interference. He can, for example, productively and blissfully work at nights when nobody and nothing will bother him. Fourth function, SI, introverted sensing. The EIE is often subject to feelings of internal physical discomfort, as if he is constantly being bothered or tormented by something. Sometimes this manifests in his habit to painfully wince and wrinkle his face, to frequently blink. One might involuntarily think that he is irritated by bright light or the wind. Sometimes by his habit to speak in a quiet and suppressed tone of voice, as if he was recently lamenting over something. Sometimes by a habit to, on the contrary, speak in a loud and sharp voice, constantly raising his intonations. The EIE is indeed sometimes irritated by bright light or loud music. Any object, any occurrence can be a source of discomfort for him or her. Sometimes the EIE as if tries to muffle this unpleasant state in himself, to put it out of his conscious awareness. The EIE may sometimes feel a need for sharp gustatory, and not only gustatory, impressions. He likes seasonings with strong, flavorful smells, which strongly excite the appetite. Any monotony in gustatory sensations frequently irritates Hamlet. He wants something that is sophisticated, new, uncommon, maybe even unusual. To this purpose, the EIE finds it interesting to try out some new dish, to learn how it tastes like and from what it was made. Sometimes he himself likes to experiment with preparation of food. Here he experiments boldly, but not always successfully. On occasion, he tries to blend some ingredients that in principle are not complementary in taste. On other occasions, he prefers simple, exaggerated tastes, because this was precisely what was needed. It happens that the EIE does not notice the quality of food products and can cut some spoiled lettuce and vegetables with rot into a salad. In addition, the EIE with his scattered attention can forget what he was preparing and from what, which ingredients he has already added and to which he is not. Some representatives of this type love not so much to prepare food, but to play the role of a cook, especially men. Women of this type soon grow annoyed by a task and approach it as some kind of boring domestic responsibility that at times they approach with a sort of irritation, as if it presents some special difficulties for them. As has already been described before, when EIE women are forced to occupy primarily with housework, this has poor effects on their character and attitude. Example: my husband has sent me to spend the summer with my mother-in-law, type EIE. On the first day when I arrived, she told me, "You will be eating separately. I won't be cooking for you. You won't like my cooking anyways." At first, I was a bit offended by this, but then I noted that she indeed is bad at handling food, and possibly she is ashamed and troubled by this, and thus she tried to hide this from me. She would also load me up by domestic work as if she was punishing me by this. Well, I'm accustomed to household work, but at the end of the summer, she nevertheless found a way to prod at me. "Why," she asks, "have you brought your sketchbook and paints with you? You haven't drawn anything the entire summer." It was evident that she was looking for a fight, but I did not need this, and tried not to give her any reasons, and this annoyed her even further. In general, setting up his living quarters and maintaining his household is not the most pleasant way to spend time for the EIE. To remember in the evening what he needs to buy for his family and for his household, for him this is excess and agonizing pressure. EIE Artists has sent her son to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread to freshen the still life model for her painting. Her son has bought 2 loaves of bread, one for the painting and another one to eat. Her mother initially was very surprised by this, but then she laughed. Vasily is growing up into a good housekeeper. The organization of everyday life is always an excess headache for the EIE that comes to less than modest results. Sometimes EIE's home is lacking in many necessary things. At times, there is something absurd in interior design. Sometimes some awkwardness in furnishing is notable. Upon entering her room, I was surprised to see a large stone plate with a beautiful ancient relief hanging above her bed. It is a sufficiently large plate, about 1.5 by 1.5 meters. I don't know what held it hanging up there, but all of this was astonishing to me. How is it possible to sleep under this plate? How is she not scared? It is exactly in his daily personal life that the EIE feels scarcity of thrilling and sharp impressions, and thus he tries to make up for it wherever and however it's possible to do. This is one of the reasons why the EIE may create difficulties from mundane life or complicate his everyday relationships, going against the grain of common sense. It happens that the EIE doesn't feel sufficient emotional infusion from his surroundings. In this case, he may arrange the interior of his home accordingly. For example, he can drape all the windows with black curtains and cloths. He may hang political posters and pictures, portraits and messages of his favorite historical and political figures everywhere. He may paint his room himself and hang his own artwork on the walls. That is, do whatever to create a pleasant emotional state for himself. Of course, things turn out for the better when EIE's dual, the LSI, takes up and deals with the organization of EIE's way of living. Economic, industrious, from nature endowed with an excellent aesthetical taste, accurate, knowing how to create and maintain order. The LSI, if he wishes so, is capable of creating for the EIE precisely those conditions of which the EIE can only dream, up to coffee delivered in bed, especially if their relations and the situation predispose them to this. LSI women are usually irreproachable managers of their home, both economical and thrifty, with each source of expenditures being written down. Furthermore, being naturally oriented at EIE's ethical values and attitudes, the LSI is not afraid of his emotional oscillations and fallouts. Moreover, he feels well in such an emotional regime. Thus, the LSI always finds methods to suggest to his dual certain aesthetical changes and additions, which from one side don't contradict his principles, while on another side direct his sensations and impressions into a more harmonious flow. If the EIE acts as the director of strong personal experiences, then the LSI is the artist of sharp, thrilling sensations. In the dual dyad EIE LSI, a constant emotional sensory interchange is going on, the whip and the cake. As EIE's emotional field changes from positive to negative, so do the pleasant and relaxing sensations created by LSI change to more sharp, exciting, and sobering ones. Complementing each other in this emotional sensory way, the EIE and the LSI create for each other an optimal psychological regime, an optimal harmony of impressions, feelings, and sensations. That which in this pair is considered to be optimal and harmonious, to representatives of other types and dual dyads may seem to be too sharp, too bizarre, and therefore unacceptable. But this, it goes without saying, is their own problem. The EIE interprets many sensory experiences and impressions emotionally or intuitively. Example story. My teacher of type EIE had her own theory of teaching painting, which stretched imagination and memory. We had to memorize a color, while on the painting only mark the colored spot by fine contour lines of the corresponding tone. As a result, the painting was covered by a network of various multicolored outlines, in which it was easy to get tangled and confused. I could not master this method. The sharpness and freshness of the immediate perception of color were lost. Frequently she loved to say, "Make this color more saturated so that it would ring, else it is quiet as if it's dead." As perceptive and sensitive the EIE is of external sources of discomfort, over time he begins to understand that its source really lies within himself, in its constant feeling of being unsettled, unattached, unprovided for, up for grabs. The EIE is sensitively aware of his own solitude. Sometimes, especially in younger years, he is inclined to play a role of a kind of sad and gloomy demon who goes around lonely and misunderstood. Gloomy thoughts about his solitude bring the EIE to reflections about the transience and frailty of existence, which especially frequently visit him when he doesn't feel well. It is sufficient to point out to the EIE his poor and unhealthy appearance, and he or she will immediately begin to reflect on the approach of old age and about the inevitable end of human life, which leads him into an even gloomier mood. When something actually threatens EIE's life, a serious illness, the life of people around him is converted into a continuous nightmare. Long before my mother, type EIE, was hospitalized, she began to morally prepare me for the day. Look here, so that you'll know. Here we keep the grains, here we keep the sugar. Also, when I die, don't forget to make payments for the house. Her operation was successful, and I didn't understand why it was necessary to prepare us for the worst. It frequently seems to the EIE that the people around him care, protect, and worry about him insufficiently. Moreover, such expectations are presented not only to people close to him. The EIE also likes when he is being visited by neighbors, coworkers, distant relatives, his students, and so on. Have you been too lazy to visit your teacher, or are you waiting until I die? The EIE is rescued from all this sulking and dissatisfaction when there appears a person in his or her life who is by nature endowed with optimism, cheerful, bold spirit, clarity of the mind, strong will, loyalty and devotion, responsiveness and friendliness, i.e., with precisely those qualities that are present in surplus in his dual, the LSI, who's capable of sensitively perceiving states of physical and emotional discomfort and of fulfilling and preempting all of the desires of his dual partner. Super id block. Fifth function, TI, introverted logic. It's difficult to find logical explanations for EIE's actions. At times, this should not even be attempted. An impression arises that the EIE sees himself outside of logic and facts. That is, he personally is persuaded by concrete logical arguments, but himself may, like a child, reference some irrelevant or made-up fact, especially if this information cannot be verified. He can often manipulate arguments and facts at his own discretion and to support his own statements, but he really dislikes and fears it when someone does this to him. The EIE is always happy for a chance to obtain some necessary or interesting information. Sometimes he does this in a casual way. Having first put his conversation partner in a relaxed state, he seemingly unintentionally asks him about some important matter. The EIE often presents him or herself as a constructive, friendly, and attentive conversationalist, at times acting as a kind of curious skeptic who gently points out some contradictions or omissions in the stated, thus provoking his conversation partners to convincingly argue with him to try to persuade him, thereby releasing to him what they know, informing him about the current state of affairs, as well as disclosing their intentions, plans, and beliefs, and showing their cards to him. In the opinion of many representatives of this type, science should never be outside of social problems and issues, politics, and public opinion. Moreover, it should actively work for the people and the social system and serve their needs and ideals. Thus, the direction of scientific research and development should be set in accordance with the humanistic and social needs, projects, and goals of the social system that subsidizes these developments. Having such a view, the EIE can combine scientific and ideological activities. True, the consequences of such an approach don't always go for the benefit of science. History knows of several examples when some representatives of this type turn the field of scientific research into ideological arenas, and scientific conventions and reports into political and personal tournament grounds. To conduct successful scientific research and development work, the EIE must be persuaded that he is working on the right track. This is especially applicable to new, experimental, not yet sufficiently studied scientific fields. The EIE often acts in a way that doesn't abide by reason and common sense, since his emotions often predominate over reason. For this very reason, he finds it difficult to be calm and objective, especially for long periods of time. Thus, his own understanding of what is objective often consists of that which is convenient and beneficial to himself, and supportive of his goals, statements, and views. Sufficiently often, the EIE exhibits a bias in selection of the objective information he's going to use. Sometimes he chooses it in a very deliberate, streamlined way. Everything depends on which goals he is trying to reach with it. Furthermore, the objectivity of the EIE often depends on what state and mood he's in. For example, if he is asked to write a recommendation letter when he is upset by something, he may write an objective, truthful characteristic with openly critical comments. On an occasion, the EIE may provide an analysis when one part completely contradicts the other. The EIE sufficiently frequently gets caught of his own illogicalities, contradictions, and streamlining of the fact that sometimes no wish remains to catch him at this any longer. Moreover, when the EIE is caught and exposed, he or she behaves like a child, acts frightened, worried, fixated, preoccupied, and finally completely entangles and confuses him or herself. The EIE generally finds it difficult to be logically sequential and consistent. The facts with which the EIE operates are sometimes so chaotically arranged and adjusted to his views that little of a cogent, sensible argument can be observed, only some emotional or ideological trends and proclivities. Nevertheless, the EIE greatly values the ability to speak out clearly, laconically, and relevantly in other people. Occasionally, he tries to memorize someone else's statements or arguments and use them at a convenient time in his own speech, which sometimes consists exactly of a chain of laconic yet expressive and memorable aphorisms. The EIE can give a clear definition to any concept only in the case when he has thoroughly studied it himself. But if he is asked to provide an explanation in his own words, then most likely it will be something that is far from the truth or even opposite in meaning. The EIE respects people who don't miss minor contradictions and omissions, who account for every detail in their assessment of the situation, who are able to figure out everything openly and thoroughly. In essence, the EIE always needs someone who is able to disentangle that which he has so meticulously entangled, someone who has remarkable power of observation and memory, someone who can provide him with the right reference or information, someone who can give him the right instruction or a verified method. As a summary, to complement him in his everyday life, to constantly introduce order into his thoughts, affairs, projects, and documentations, the EIE needs precisely such a partner as the LSI. Moreover, he is as necessary to him as a breath of air. Without the LSI, many of EIE's dreams and intentions will remain as fruits of his hopes and imagination. Sixth function, SE, extroverted sensing. To say that the EIE possesses some special energy, drive, persistence, and significant volitional potential would be an exaggeration. EIE's drive is more similar to a fixation. Neither can the EIE be called decisive, for he is inclined to experience doubts and fluctuations. The EIE is also not characterized by any special push-through powers. He is always in need of someone who would hustle and exert themselves on his behalf. The EIE himself does not yield to direct volitional pressuring, but he also resists it with difficulty since it requires too great a physical exertion and strain than he can provide. Nevertheless, all of these problems are easily solved if the EIE is endowed with many jurisdictions and powers within the framework of a specific social system. Then he can unwind and work with an enormous energy without being fatigued. The higher EIE's position, the more possibilities he sees for himself. Hamlet is inclined to misuse power. He is capable of using it to assert himself. The awareness of his own authority greatly inspires and activates him. However, such awareness of his limitless power and authority is dangerous for Hamlet. It converts him into an evil demon who entertains himself by ruling fates and lives of people. To work within the framework of some system is especially beneficial for the EIE, at least because in this case, he's already settled somewhere and only needs to show himself and what he can do, which is no problem for him. The EIE is a flexible and dynamic worker. He knows how to quickly assess the situation and quickly adapt to new working conditions. He respects the system of hierarchical systems, respects authorities and his higher-ups who have been acknowledged in this system. He respects other workers of the system by whose labor it is maintained and upheld. Within the framework of the system, the EIE lives conveniently and comfortably, and he is only glad to occupy some position within it. Sometimes, foreseeing the looming crash of his system, the EIE prepares for possible ways to retreat, and for retention and safeguarding of at least a part of it, on the basis of which it will be possible to recreate its nucleus in the future. When EIE's system is destroyed, he attempts to restore and reconnect the surviving parts to this nucleus, to give them a new slogan, to fill them with relevant meaning, thus preparing it for an advance in the future. The EIE who has fallen out of his system and who could not find for himself another place in society is a tragic sight. This is Charlie Chaplin's depiction of an unemployed drifter. The EIE finds it difficult to keep himself structured and organized, and make himself do something by his own willpower. For this, he needs a willful impulse from the outside. Only his dual, the LSI, is capable of keeping EIE organized by willful actions. With this, the LSI is usually strict and unwavering. Any other means of influencing the EIE are usually ineffective. Trying to persuade the EIE verbally, he will simply continue and direct the discussion into the needed to him course. Get himself another break while he is talking, and remain with the same opinions. From direct pressure, the EIE will also slip away. He'll either become angry and upset, put up a scene of his victimhood from vile oppressors, or make witty jokes and start up some comedy. On the other hand, an EIE who is interested and wholly absorbed by his occupation does not need to be pushed to work. The most deserving and hard-working representatives of this type, who have achieved for themselves exceptional creative successes, can serve as models of endurance, fitness for work, determination, and purposefulness. Although, for their excessive physical strain and exertion, they sometimes have to pay with their brilliant and nevertheless short-lived career. When the EIE is absorbed by work, he may not take his health and his physical capabilities into account. Here the guidance of his dual, the LSI, proves to be very appropriate. The LSI, as has already been mentioned, is exceptionally sensitive and attentive to the states of his dual partner. When EIE's strengths wane, the LSI can switch him to another, less strenuous activity, or even forcibly insist that he take a break and get some rest. When the EIE is dualized, there's always a person near him who can coordinate his work and distribute the tasks such that he doesn't overwork himself. By this, the LSI creates an optimal regime for his dual for his productive and creative work. Id block. Seventh function, FI, introverted ethics. The ethical code of the EIE works flawlessly precisely within the framework of a social system. With authorities and subordinates, the EIE behaves as appropriate, as needed. To equals, EIE relates on an equal foot, and in an ethical sense tries to show himself from the best possible side. For this very reason, the LSI, who shares similar views and convictions to the EIE, should not be worried about the success of his relations with his dual. Here he is guaranteed to have the most devoted friendship and a sincere, selfless love. Kindred connections and relations between family members for EIE, just as for LSI, are of paramount significance, since both of them view the family as a social structure. There could be chaos and anarchy everywhere else in the entire world, but in family relations there must be strict, once and for all set and clearly defined order. If there's no such order, the EIE may oppose himself to family relations, refuse to subordinate himself either to general regulations or to general social structure. Representatives of this type very painfully experience any problems in their family: divorces, quarrel of parents, betrayals and cheating by their spouses, treachery with respect to family interests, offenses inflicted by family members. All of these are very serious and emotionally sensitive events for the EIE, with which it is very difficult to reconcile since they deeply touch his ethical values and attitudes. For this very reason, the EIE always considers himself or herself obligated to respond or somehow react to such events, to declare a boycott, to take vengeance, to not see their family, to leave their family on their own, etc. If such behavior is within the framework of tradition, for the EIE, this substantially facilitates the task. If not, then he or she acts from own discretion, without attaching special importance to the evaluation of his or her behavior by surrounding people. Since the sphere of EIE's ethical interests consists of observations of people's relations within the framework of a specific social structure, the arrangement and distribution of forces in a social group is always of decisive importance to the EIE, since precisely this determines the nature and direction of his or her activities. For this reason, for the EIE, it is very important to reveal hidden ethical tendencies and undercurrents in proper time, to reveal a potential leader, a potential favorite or aide. For this very reason, the EIE with special attention looks so that the behavior and relations of all members of a group would correspond to the places occupied by them in the hierarchy. Paraphrasing a Latin proverb, one can say that the EIE watches after the fact that what is permissible for Jove would not be permissible for a bull, that is, so that the behavior and the relations within the framework of the system would be appropriate. It should be mentioned that the LSI builds his relations on basis of the same principle. What is permissible for Jove would not be permissible for a bull. In other words, behavior within the framework of a system must correspond to a person's position, since it is defined by the right of the entrusted responsibility. Specifically in this, both the LSI and the EIE see the singularly just and fair ethical principles, the principles which correspond to their system of views and relations. Each time when someone in a group acts as a prima donna, the EIE notices this first of all, and this causes his concern. Why are they acting this way? On what basis? Who and what stands behind this? Is there some concealed tendency here which the EIE has omitted, through which he may end up tossed overboard? For this very reason, the event that is most scandalous and igniting for the EIE is when someone, without any logical basis for it, without any sanctions or authorities, behaves in an unbecoming manner. The EIE feels agitated and indignant over this, not only because such behavior erodes the framework and regulations of the system, thereby creating chaos within it, but also because such unpredictability introduces confusion and interruptions into EIE's own plans and estimates, and essentially threatens his own place within the system. EIE's intriguing and active style of social contact is essentially the main method for representatives of this type to make some observations and to obtain information precisely on this vitally important for them question. Each time when the EIE needs to increase the inflow of information, he or she begins to actively make social contacts with other people, to play certain personal games, to intrigue, and moreover, the EIE does this consciously and intentfully. Results are obtained immediately, without delay, and are often quite stunning. If, for example, the EIE is insufficiently informed about the power and ethical potential of people around him, then within the shortest period of time, his nearest environment gets charged up with a fever of sorting out relations, and unnoticeably for many of the participants gets converted into a sort of chicken coop where everybody pecks at each other, and says and performs such things about which it is then unpleasant to recall. While the unassuming culprit of this event observes this play from the side and reflects on the fact of how much the nasty, stupid, and dirty there is in people. Now, after these events, he has learned of this for sure. The EIE is capable of creating ethical tangles and games on empty space from zero facts. He or she doesn't even need a necessary occasion or motive for this. The sole reason for this is often EIE's sheer ignorance and incomprehension of what basis a person allows himself this or another behavior, what are the motives for his behavior, and how they are personally related to him. The purpose of intrigue and the form of intrigue are often assigned subconsciously, i.e., the EIE doesn't always realize himself or herself why he does what he does, why he is acting this way. The EIE simply feels perturbed by something and begins to act, putting social wheels into motion. The EIE's own lack of knowledge and understanding of what is disturbing him, he tries to obtain information by any means, that is all. Sometimes experiencing awkwardness in a social group for his own omissions or unfulfilled promises, the EIE can feel an insurmountable wish to create some sort of havoc, which helps him to distract other people's attention from vital problems and to redirect their effort into an ethical course of sorting out of their relationships, which subsequently gives the EIE the right to say, yes, I may not be the best leader, but you aren't angels either. Sometimes, feeling worried for his position in the system, seeing in someone a future competitor or simply a potential leader, the EIE begins to test his friends, subordinates, or followers in order to learn the degree of this person's influence on them. Moreover, in this, the EIE's method may be most unethical. He may tempt, intimidate, provoke to frankness, blackmail, gossip, tell tall tales, or incite. To each person, he finds his own key. He must investigate the area of ethical problems of each. In this, the EIE is an untiring researcher. The EIE originally does not believe in absolute holiness and infallibility. Passing each person through his tests and checks, he seemingly attempts to open up the other side of his soul, convincing the person, and simultaneously himself, what is his authentic self, and everything else is only pretense and simulation. Predisposition for sin, this is indeed so natural, what's there to be afraid of? Such seems to be the conclusion of EIE's investigations and orchestrations, while each of the participating artists already feels that he has been recruited, introduced, and initiated into some brotherhood of sinners. To the search of the guilty party, the EIE devotes much time and effort. Most often, the guilty one is the person who ignores EIE's leadership or threatens his position. The EIE always feels a person who is internally independent. He then feels a necessity to figure out the reason for this independence, to find a weak, painful point in his soul, to probe their pain limit. The movie of Roland Bykov's Scarecrow illustrates well this situation. There, the search for a traitor is headed by the Iron Button, Hamlet, who also incites the true culprit to a public suicide. There are other methods of ethical influence characteristic of some representatives of this type. The frequent change of favorites and disgraced, the collective hunting of the guilty, the creation of fake poor reputation with the subsequent public reprimands and castigation, the skill of turning any discussion into judgment, and so on. With all the apparent unethicalness of these methods, for the EIE, this is nothing more than probing of the painful points of people who are of interest to him, and only a method of obtaining the necessary for him information. EIE's ethical inconsistency can be explained in the same manner. Today, he or she can be a sincere friend of yesterday's enemy. Moreover, for justification for this inconsistency, the EIE will find a number of actual, logical, factual reasons, except for one, that he or she was simply testing the person who was of interest. Precisely this explanation won't ever come to the EIE's mind, since the method of affecting a person by ethical relation, the EIE actualized subconsciously. However, if the EIE is directed to this thought, he may completely agree with it, since in the very fact of testing or checking someone, he won't see anything unjustified or condemnatory. Since in acting this way, he obtains information about the loyalty of the surrounding people, about their devotion to the ideals of his system, about their predisposition to think otherwise, i.e., all that which interests and worries him as a person, as a citizen at the given moment. The unethicalness of methods can always be attributed and signed off to the conditions of political situation and to the necessities of the historical moment. And finally, eighth function, NE, extroverted intuition. It is only in Shakespeare's plays that the characters of EIE type could trustingly share with the spectators how they are going to act in one or another situation. In real life, the EIE cannot even describe this for himself, since this process happens to him at a subconscious level. Moreover, some representatives of this type assert that for them it's easier in a given situation to account for the possibilities of other people rather than for themselves. Which is indeed so, since the demonstrative function actively realizes himself under the effect of an external impulse and not an internal one. Nevertheless, the EIE uses this quality magnificently well, both in his daily life and in extreme situations. Due to his strong, subconsciously realized intuition of possibilities, NE, for the EIE, there do not exist hopeless situations, and he or she always finds some method or way to leave dry out of water. Thankfully, to this property, the EIE almost never can be shoved to a wall. He or she has thousands of methods to get untangled and get loose, to distract attention from himself, direct it to some other cause of conflict, or substitute another person in his place. The reserves of EIE's inventions and stunts is inexhaustible. The EIE is capable of sitting out and waiting out any danger. He or she is capable of outplaying any enemy, of hiding so that no one will find him, of tangling his tracks so that no one will find their ends. The EIE is not only capable of climbing out from any trap, but also placing the hunter right into it. The EIE is able to convince any person of his rightness, creating and thinking up of various reasons and arguments for it, which can never be verified nor refuted. The EIE will never say something which can later be turned against him. Even if this happens, he will either deny and reject words, or will try to give to reinterpret them and give them another sense. The EIE will never allow strangers to approach his pie. EIEs never do anything to their own detriment, but they magnificently well know how to create an illusion of self. EIE, as an innate leader, does not like to recognize his defeat. He is an excellent strategist and knows how to come up with many options and possibilities of retreating, to prepare himself with secret movements, labyrinths, to find doubles, to organize secret protection. Contemporary EIE politicians nearly perfectly manage this entire arsenal of protection and know how to continue their game, even when being, as it would seem, deposed. The EIE is able to show miracles of survivability and invulnerability. The same qualities characterize any of the type EIE political movements: neo-Nazism, Islamic fundamentalism, international terrorism, Chechen separatism, and many others. Breaking off relations with an EIE is very difficult, and possible only if he himself does not try to prevent this. Otherwise, he won't let himself nor others to leave the game. The EIE can continue it in the most unexpected forms and at the most invisible front lines, but it is for certain that he will keep reminding about himself and won't allow others to forget or ignore him. EIEs beneficially use their demonstrative intuition not only in our own individual interests, but also for the needs of their nearest surrounding people, expressing in this way their special positive consideration and sympathy toward them. The EIE greatly likes it when people around him share their plans with him. This so is pleasant when you are being trusted. It means they see a friend in you. In this minute, the EIE feels himself completely and fully in love with his conversation partner, and he wishes to pay back with anything for the shown trust and confidence, and at the same time demonstrate his own foresight and impressive life experience. For the EIE, it doesn't matter whether his conversation partner is sharing this with him out of boredom, or whether he has actually found somebody more clever and insightful than him. In any event, the EIE considers it to be his duty to point out all the possible errors and lapses in those stated plans, even if those plans are already confirmed and are in the process of being realized. The latter fact is upsetting to the EIE. Why hasn't anyone sought his advice and counsel earlier? This is explained by the fact that the EIE is subconsciously oriented at the weak intuition of the LSI, who will first of all try to consult and only then act. It is only for this reason that the EIE worries about the opportuneness of his warnings and always prefers to warn other people in advance. The EIE knows how to foresee not only separate and distinct potential troubling situations, but also impending global catastrophes. The EIE sees well the historical connections between events and phenomena of the most varied order. Representatives of this type are frequently interested in the information about all possible unusual happenings and extraordinary phenomena. Some of them become fascinated by mysticism, magic, become superstitious or fanatically religious, or may feel like they possess strong biofield or extrasensory abilities. Among representatives of this type, one may encounter many talented people, outstanding and gifted personalities, which are characterized by exceptional erudition and the widest range of interests. That's all. Thank you.